All right, man. Peace. It's Bronzebird here with another video. Yeah. So, as you know, guys, it here in America that it's supposed to be known that February is notoriously known for being African American History Month or Black History Month in general. And, a lot of things that, the American public school system allows for Black people to learn about their time here in America. Usually the narrative, as we know, is always talking about slavery and talking about how we were once we got off the ships from quote unquote Africa, and just knowing that this is the place that we landed. We were slaves for approximately, I mean, really, if you do the timeline, primarily 200 something years, if that's the quote unquote idea about us being slaves. And then the fact that, after slavery, Reconstruction era, after that, the 1900s, Great Migration, and now still the woodwork of a bunch of so-called African Americans being part of a lot of these, a big population in inner cities, such as New York City, Philadelphia, places in Florida, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, California, and all these different things. But that was also caused by already moving there before then, like, 19, I probably would say probably before the 1920s and 1910s. But anyway, you know, just to run down memory lane, me growing up and going to school, learning about Black people, learning about things as such as pertinent as like Black musicians, learning about the Harlem Renaissance, and then, them having a Harlem Renaissance of the West, things from jazz, things from Negro spirituals, things from all these tales that just came out of, being a so-called African American such as myself. One of the things I can remember, and I believe that, millennials specifically picked up on this. I'm pretty sure Gen Z did too, or the curtail end of Gen Z starts to understand this, is that more than likely in these school systems, we got tired of hearing about slavery stories all day and about what's this that happened, and we were only slaves, we were nothing more, and then we just decided to build up with the American society after we were quote unquote freed from slavery, you know. And they never want to tell you about anything that else happened with so-called Black people. And that's because the public school system knows that. And they want to keep the so-called Black man or so-called Black people endowed to just not knowing about anything else except for slavery. So that the idea is that you always were down when you came to this country. They never want to show you the greatness that they have. And I know specifically certain groups of so-called Black men, like, Hebrew Israelites, Moors, and the rest of them, they will tell you about Black people and their greatness. Even Pan-Africans will tell you about how Black people used to be kings and queens and all these different things. But one of the things that is remarkable hearing this story that I'm going to show you is that a New York public school decided to unintentionally, as they say, serve chicken and waffles for the first day of Black History Month with a side of watermelon as a dessert. And of course, we know how offensive it is when, we look at, this such as this on your screen, blackface with a so-called Black man being represented as having big lips, dark skin, nappy hair, eating a watermelon and speaking broken English. To decide that, of course, there were so-called white people that made fun of the so-called Black man, made him seem like he's very ignorant and incapable of having a productive conversation. And, really trying to seek the validation of a white man. Then, of course, later on in history, you had so-called Black men that decided to remix it, decided to do their own show and production and make their own blackface comedy or satire, just to kind of like, rear back and say, we can do it too. So all those different things that come in. But I'm going to show you my screen and tell you exactly what I'm talking about. So, peep. So it says New York school apologizes after kicking off Black History Month with fried chicken and watermelon. Shout outs to Steven. A New York middle school and its food vendor are apologizing for serving chicken and watermelon for lunch on the first day of Black History Month, an error the vendor called unintentionally insensitive. Students at Nyack Middle School in Rockland County, just outside New York City, were served chicken and waffles with watermelon, food stereotypically associated with Black people, after Aramark, the school's food vendor, changed the menu items without telling the school, according to school administrators. The offering of chicken and waffles as an entree with watermelon as a dessert on the first day of Black History Month was inexcusably insensitive and reflected a lack of understanding of our district's vision to address racial bias. The school said in a letter to parents, according to local news affiliate WABC. The meal was originally supposed to be Philly cheesesteak, broccoli, and fresh fruit, according to administrators and a menu on the school's website. Aramark apologized for the decision in a statement, saying it was unintentional oversight. We apologize for the unintentional insensitivity shown on February 1st, the first day of Black History Month, the company said in a statement, according to CNN. While our menu was not intended as a cultural meal, we acknowledge that the timing was inappropriate and our team should have been more thoughtful in its service. New York University severed its ties with Aramark in 2019 after about a year after the vendor served a Black history meal that included ribs, collard greens, mac and cheese, and watermelon. And, I am familiar with the food vendor Aramark. I don't know anything about them being culturally insensitive towards so-called African Americans, but, I don't know if the person behind it, the founder or not even the founder, the manager, the corporate manager of it that's running it, is doing this intentionally to kind of just be an a-hole. Like, I don't know what's the thing about that. Like, why do you decide to serve these type of lunches, and why do you decide to put so-called African Americans as a focal point of this? And this is the problem with it, because anytime it's celebrating a nationality, so-called African Americans are made to look down upon. Whereas if they serve Hispanic food or they serve Indian food or serve any other nations of food, it's not looked down upon. It's actually uplifting and being culturally correct. But when it comes to so-called African Americans, if you serve mac and cheese or you serve fried chicken and waffles, it's supposed to be like that slavery food. But even with that, there are so many theories about how the concept of chicken and waffles in particular came about. First of all, it's not even slavery food because slaves didn't create it. That came from Europe. You know what I'm saying? It came from like the Scots and Europeans, especially mac and cheese. But the mac and cheese was actually a learned recipe made by a so-called Black man later on. But mac and cheese, for example, comes from Europe. Fried chicken is a concept that comes from Europe also. Waffles, the same thing. So all of this comes from Europe, and it was passed on to America later on. But the concept of chicken and waffles was even made to, it got popularized in the Harlem Renaissance, where, a lot of people have sat there and said, the concept, what the idea was, is that, a lot of these musicians, after the club pretty much closed, after their set, the lights went out, they wanted like a quick little meal. So they decided to get, fried chicken and waffles. That was just popularized in the North, but it came from the South, all this other stuff. And then Pennsylvania with the Dutch. It's so many different theories. They said that fried chicken and waffles come from, but in my ideas, it's not slavery food. Besides that, just going on to the point, the nerve-wracking thing about Black History Month, which I think I'm probably going to make another video on, is that so-called Black people still rail on the negativity about them, on the existence of this land in America. They don't want to acknowledge there's many things that so-called Black people have done before slavery and pretty much after slavery, or let's just even say during slavery, where they've created a lot of phenomenal inventions, have done a lot of phenomenal things. And of course, like I feel like your children has to be exposed to the truth, because the school system is not going to tell you the truth. And when it comes to even a lot of the media, they're always going to point to your child learning the negative stuff about Black people in America. Right now, the conversation is about reparations, and we deserve reparations. We deserve that 40 acres and a mule. And it was a bestowed promise that actually was a lie. It was a lie created by the government in order to promise a 40 acres and a mule after you fight the war. But we didn't get jack anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's just really funny about how these different things go on. And my idea about it is, I believe that Aramark, if this is the second time it happened, that means that they were aware that they were doing this on purpose and doing this to intimidate, no, not even intimidate, to disrespect so-called Black people in general. But what I will say is this, besides this, teach so-called Black children the truth. And I'm directing this conversation to so-called African Americans that's listening to this. Teach Black children the truth. Schools are not going to do it. They have no interest. And especially me noticing this as I started growing up, I started just noticing, I said, it can't always be slavery. And I know a lot of fellow people from my generation, as we grow older, from, our kid years to our teenage years to young adult years, we were just like, it has to be more than this. But otherwise than that, please give me your thoughts in the comment section. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Peace.